Hi guys, I'm Pablo, and today I will be discussing the Spanish fly, which has the scientific name Lida vesicatoria. And although it has fly in its name, it is actually not among the dipterans at all. The insect itself is often mistaken for being in the genus Cantharis, which is also completely incorrect. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because later in the presentation, you'll be able to understand why this misconception actually occurs. I also want to mention the Latin name, which Lida means rage, and vesicatoria means blister, which you might also be able to relate to later on in the presentation. So, as we all know, scientific classification isn't exactly the most interesting thing, which you can also see by Jim Carrey's face. But what I want you to gather from this slide are the order and family which these insects belong to, with the order being Coleoptera and the family being Meloidae, which are commonly known as the blister beetles. And if you remember that its species name vesicatoria means blister, you can maybe see a slight connection here. However, why blister is in the name will actually make more sense later. So, with anything, I always believe it's good to go over some general information, so that's why I'm going to incorporate my lifestyle choice into this presentation. The Spanish fly itself holds the stereotypical beetle structure, with the thorax narrower than its head or abdomen, which is attached to a narrow neck. They have a very elongated abdomen, and generally they're 15 to 22 millimeters long, with 22 being the biggest for actually most blister beetles. It's typical. But what's not typical about the Spanish fly, or other beetles, and unique about the Spanish fly, is that they have a very emerald green coloration, and that is covered in golden luster. Usually they're not this vibrant, the beetles. The Spanish fly itself does not also have the widest distribution in the world, but it is found in southern Europe as well as northern and southern Asia. They usually reside in a warm climate, and typically they're in scrublands or wooded areas. That's what they call home. And the adults will usually feed on vegetation such as honeysuckle, white willow trees, or ash, other plants like that are in the area. So I find the life cycle of the Spanish fly to be actually really awesome, and this is especially because of its unique larval stage. So it'll all start with a yellow cylindrical egg, and specifically an adult female will deposit around 6 clusters of these eggs into the soil, with each cluster containing around 50 to 300 eggs. And this usually happens around 3 weeks after mating. And 1 to 3 weeks later, the eggs will hatch, and out will come larvae with very long legs that are very mobile. And the reason they're so mobile is because right away they're starving. And what their larvae will do is they'll actually roam around in groups, and they'll find the first blade of grass they can see, and they'll climb to the very top of it. And what they're going to do is they're going to form a cluster at the top of the blade of grass, and they're going to send out a pheromone that resembles that of a female bee. And the reason they're doing that is because they're going to try to attract a male bee to them. And once a male bee actually finds them, the male bee is going to try to mate with them, and we all know that's not going to work out. But as it's trying, the larvae are actually going to embark onto the male bee, like they're going to walk on over to it, and then because the male bee is still unsatisfied that it didn't mate, it's going to try to find a female bee now, with the larvae attached to it. And once it does find a female bee, it will actually successfully mate, and the larvae, what they're going to do is they're going to transfer over to the female bee. And once the mating process is done, the female bee is going to return to its burrow, and as you know, in burrows there are eggs and pollen, which for the larvae is actually food. So the larvae, now they're going to be happy, and they're going to feed on the eggs and pollen for around the first 5 instars of their life cycle. Usually the first 4 instars are the shortest one, with the 5th instar being the longest one. The first 4 are only like a couple days each, and the 5th one is just around like 14 days or something on average. But as the larvae go through these instars, their legs become shorter and shorter, while they also become fatter and fatter and become more grub-like. So once the 5th instar actually finishes, what can happen is overwintering, with pupatation occurring the next spring. So it's like hibernation, right? Or it can happen where the larvae dig a chamber into the soil, molting into the 6th instar, where they overwinter until the next spring, and sometimes it can even last up to 2 years. And this is where the 7th instar will happen, and then finally the pupae stage will happen. So it doesn't always happen where the 6th and 7th instar are skipped. Sometimes it'll go right to the 5th star to the pupae stage, and sometimes there'll be a 6th and 7th, which are like a hibernation stage. But once the pupae stage occurs, this is where basically the pupae resembles an adult. There's just slight differences, like it's lighter in coloration, and also the wings and legs are more tightly pressed against the ventral surface. And usually the pupae stage lasts around 14 days. Then as they go through the stage, they become darker in coloration, and then the adult is born. So remember how I said blister beetles are often mistaken for being in the genus Cantharis? This is exactly why, because blister beetles contain a substance called cantharidin within them. And if you didn't know, cantharidin is a very harmful substance. So to give you a general idea, a deadly dose of it is around 30 milligrams, and 1 gram of it would be enough to cause symptoms in around 5,000 people. And each beetle contains around 0.2 to 0.7 milligrams, but it's still enough to do some serious damage to one person, just one beetle. It can still kill you. And you may ask, does this substance provide any purpose for them? Well, it might be kind of obvious that it does. It is for defensive purposes. And so what males will actually do is they'll secrete this substance orally onto their eggs, and they'll actually give the eggs like a blistery effect. And that'll make it so prey will not want to eat them. First, because they're unattractive looking, and also because the stuff's toxic. So if anything eats it, it'll definitely feel it, you know. But so if we come into contact with cantharidin, it's not going to be good. There's going to be blistering and irritation on our skin, and if it's ingested, it gets even worse. There's stuff like internal blistering, there's ulcers, there's bleeding of the gastrointestinal and urinary tracts, and it can even affect your genitalia, and it can even lead to organ failure. Like, it gets that severe and you can even die from it. So the moral of the story is, if you ever see a Spanish fly, don't eat it and have a sandwich instead. So after discussing the threats of these bugs, you may be thinking, how on earth could these things be useful? Well, actually, back in the Middle Ages, they were thought to be quite useful, and they were almost seen as a delicacy, and people would always try to go out on expeditions and hunt for them. And one big reason for it is that the Spanish fly is one of the oldest aphrodisiacs known to man. And if you don't know what an aphrodisiac is, it's actually something that stimulates sexual desire. So these aphrodisiacs the Spanish fly was used in many love potions, and if you drank this love potion, it would not feel good in the slightest, but you would be sexually aroused. You would have the same symptoms as being aroused. And for example, ingesting cantharidin can give you priapism, which is basically persistent painful erections. And personally, I would take Viagra instead. Would not recommend that. It's not fun experiencing pain. The Spanish fly was also ingested by women back in the time for abortion purposes, but we also learned this wasn't intelligent at all because, as I said, it completely damages your internal organs. So it would destroy their reproductive system as well as killing the fetus, but it's not a smart thing to do at all. But anyway, because of this toxin is so potent, it was actually also used to make poisons in the ancient times. So that's actually something that's useful for poisons. But so you're probably still thinking this insect doesn't seem to have any importance at all to humans. WTF Pablo. It's just one thing I wanted to make clear is that this is just one of those wild cases where we believed it was of great use in the past, but through research and experience, we learned that it was just generally a harmful bug which you should just try to stay away from. But even though this is generally true, surprisingly, I haven't totally let you down. It can actually cure warts. So the chemical does this by causing a blister to form under a wart, where the blister cuts off all the blood circulation to the wart, leading to its destruction once and for all. It's so efficient at doing so that there's actually not even scarring. And it also gets better. Cantharidin can also be used to cure molluscum contagiosum, it's called, which is a relatively common viral infection of the skin, and your skin is covered in firm, roundless, painless bumps. And as you can guess, it treats the infection by blistering as well. And you can't get this stuff over the